Average hiring costs for company drivers are near a 5-year low, which makes it a perfect time to invest in hiring those new drivers year after. In addition to that, click costs on social media are hitting lows not seen since clear back in May of 2020. So it may be time to consider shifting some of your spend to platforms such as Facebook. The long quest to mandate speed limiters on heavy-duty trucks looks like it has come to an end as the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have withdrawn the 2 primary proposals requiring the devices on heavy-duty trucks. We'll dive into the details on that in this month's news story. Plus, as we inch closer and closer to the new tariff deadlines, we'll check in with Michigan State's Jason Miller for his thoughts on what's happening with the economy and where he thinks we're headed. All that and more straight ahead on the August 2025 edition of our show. For Randall Reilly, I'm Joshua Miller, and this is the 30-Day Reset. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another edition of the 30-Day Reset. We're back here every month to take a look at hiring, freight, news, and economic data to help you get a better idea of where the market for driver recruiting has been and where it's going. In addition to our monthly videos, we produce a monthly download that covers everything you see here on our show and goes into even more detail than we have time to cover in our 30-Day Reset video. That's available to you for free down below the video player on our Randall Reilly site or in the description if you happen to be watching us over on YouTube. And speaking of YouTube, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Now, with all that out of the way, let's just get into it, shall we? First up, it's Trucking by the Numbers, brought to you by Stratas. In the overall big picture, job posting activity fell by 4% in June as job seekers for those jobs dipped 3%. Lead costs were up 1% in June, though preliminary data indicates that July costs will be down around 2%. Lead costs shot up by 25% for team company driver campaigns, but that cost has been so low previously that even with that large increase, July's numbers are still the second lowest in the past 2 years. Hiring costs continue to remain favorable for fleets, and the recent shift in owner-op hiring costs are returning to more normal levels. As I mentioned in our opening, the average advertising hiring costs for company drivers are now at a near 5-year low, as are the click costs on social media platforms. When it comes to owner-operators, the lead-to-hire ratio for that driver segment is now at its most favorable on record, which indicates to us that owner-ops are currently motivated to partner up with carriers in an effort to secure more consistent loads, and more carriers are now adding owner-ops, which has led to increased competition. Looking over at the freight side of the equation, the overall load volume was up 14% year over year, while the average spot rates, they remain flat. By segment, dry van load volume was down 7% with flat rates year over year. Refrigerated load volume was down 6% while rates were up 2% year over year. And flatbed loads were up 23% year over year while seeing a 1% dip in the spot rate year over year. If you'd like to dive into more of the numbers yourself, I recommend that you take a look at our Stratas platform. A link for a demo is available for that down below, as well as the link to this month's download, which features all of the number I just covered and much, much more. Now that we've covered the numbers, let's dig into this month's news story. The Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration and the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration have backed down and withdrawn 2 proposals that would require speed limiting devices on heavy-duty trucks. Based on the original proposals, one a joint rulemaking notice made in 2016 and an advance notice of supplemental proposed rulemaking from May of 2022, it was estimated that limiting the speed of heavy-duty trucks could potentially save 63 to 214 lives annually. In addition, it was thought that $848 million could be saved in fuel and emissions based on the prices at the time of the proposal. The potential speed limitations did receive some pushback, and with the withdrawal of the proposed regulation, the Federal Register has now released a list of 8 reasons explaining the withdrawal. These primarily dealt with cost, potential safety issues, and the impact on states and their ability to set their own speed limits. All of this comes on the heels of the Transportation Secretary, Sean Duffy, releasing a package of pro-trucker policies, which included a promise to end the threat of impending speed limiters. In reaction to the news, Louis Pugh, the Executive Vice President of the Owner-Operator Independent Drivers Association, had this to say. The old ways of doing things in Washington are over. After nearly 20 years, Big Trucking's proposed speed limiter mandate is dead. The failed proposal represented the worst of Washington and the worst of trucking. big corporations trying to use big government to undercut small businesses and increase corporate profits. Not only would this proposal have harmed working class Americans, small business truckers in our communities, it would have made our highways less safe for all motorists. For more details on this story, you can head over to truckersnews.com. The link for that is down below. Now let's check in with Jason Miller for this month's economic update.
We're at right now, there was a lot of questions as we moved into July, what would end up happening. We had the enhanced English language enforcement taking place. One school of thought said this was going to be a big drawdown on capacity that could kick off the spot market. The other school of thought that I was a part of said this won't be that big of a deal. The inspection data has shown it was not that big of a deal, and the dry van spot market has not in any way precipitously changed. If we look at implied dry van spot rates on a line haul basis, basically July is nothing to really get excited about. 2025 is recreating 2024 almost perfectly, and as we all know, that's been a fairly soft year. We basically have been stuck moving along the bottom on now for 2.5 years, really from about Q1 of 2023. And other than for seasonal tightening, we've not gotten beyond that. And when we look and include fuel, that way we can compare contract and spot rates. Basically sort of the same pattern exists. The series are moving in parallel to each other. And from a carrier standpoint, that's not a good sign. The premium at which point the market tends to shift over when those spot rates start really approaching those broker by contract rates, we're just nowhere near that right now. We're still running about a 17% premium for the contract. And so right now at the moment, it just does not seem that the market is going to be ready to flip over anytime soon. Again, big reason for this is manufacturing demand right now is measured by new orders, both from the Federal Reserve Board as well as the Institute for Supply Management. Both different data sets are showing July as still in contraction territory. Both data sets have shown very sharp drawdowns since the start of the year, after the month of January for ISM and after February for the Federal Reserve data. Now, I've had some folks say, well, hey, maybe this is just a holdover from the Biden administration, and so that means once tariffs get solidified, maybe things improve substantially. What I can tell you is actually doing a analysis as complex as the type we actually publish in peer review articles suggests that that is just not the case, and that it really is the tariff policies. And what I've done here is basically charted the new order data from ISM for President Trump's first term as well as the second term, with the month of zero, meaning the election month in November of each respective year. What you're always looking for is, was the data behaving similarly before he took office? And the answer is yes. You'll see almost what we call perfect parallel trends there in those charts. What we see is a massive divergence starting in February of the respective years when the president took office. And that change, as we'd say, if we statistically estimate this, it is very large, and it is what we'd say is statistically significant, meaning there is something very different happening here. And the answer is ISM's new orders have been about 8.64 units weaker this time around in 2025 than they were in the same period in 2017. The only policy change that can explain that is we weren't seeing any type of tariffs put in place in 2017 at that time. And so there's really no other way to say it than it does appear the tariffs are indeed the cause of this. The reason this matters is as we forecast for the back half of 2025, we're about to have tariff rates cement themselves at some of the highest levels that we've seen in the last 100 years. And if we can very clearly say tariffs are not helping manufacturing demand at the moment, it is at this point impossible for me to get excited about the second half of this year. I'm unfortunately writing 2025 off as the year of any type of significant recovery of the dry van sector. And at this point, I would say we've got to wait till Q2 of 2026. So unfortunately, as we've been recording these, each point about Q3 of the year, I'm starting to have to make the statement, we've went by Q2, the recovery's not here. We now have to kick it off beyond the holidays. Unfortunately, I'm doing that. So if you're planning strategically, say don't expect the market to turn beyond usual seasonal tightening until Q2 of 2026 at the absolute earliest. Let's wait and see what ends up happening on the tariff front and how things evolve there. So with that, try to stay cool, folks, and we'll be in touch for September.
Thank you for that, Jason. Not the best news in the world, but we do appreciate your thoughts and expertise. And with that, we've come to the end of yet another edition of the 30-Day Reset. So as I leave you, I'll say it one final time. Don't forget, you can get your copy of all the data we covered today in this month's 30-Day Reset download, and that's available down below. There's also a Contact Us link, a Stratas demo link, and the link to this month's news story as covered by truckersnews.com. We'll be back again at the start of next month to take another look back at the data to help you move forward. Until then, thanks for watching.